Today is Friday, July 5th. The U.S. Supreme Court wrapped up a historic term this week, and in its final day, it issued what's possibly its most highly anticipated ruling yet, one that had to do with presidential immunity. In other words, can presidents be criminally prosecuted for breaking the law? Not only will the ruling impact all past and current presidents, but it could also specifically affect the criminal cases against former President Trump right now. So today, while our team is taking some time off for the 4th of July holiday, we have a special edition episode for you instead of our typical Friday news roundup. You'll hear a great explanation of this Supreme Court ruling and its potential implications from constitutional law expert Jessica Levinson. She's a professor at Loyola Law School, the host of the podcast Passing Judgment, and she's a legal contributor at CBS News. Jessica Levinson breaks down the majority opinion and the dissenting one, answers the question, can a president just assassinate an opponent now? And what it all means for the cases against former President Trump. Jessica Levinson, thank you so much for joining us here on The Newsworthy.
Thanks for having me.
So first, I'd love for you to just kind of outline what the justices said in this ruling in simple terms, and then we'll dive into some more of the details.
A quick summary is a majority of the court is saying that for current or former presidents, there is at least some immunity from criminal prosecution. And then there's a lot of it depends, but that's the top line here. And the second line is that there is absolute immunity from criminal prosecution for those things that only a president can do. For instance, pardoning somebody or appointing an ambassador, or maybe even hiring and firing an attorney general. Those are things that nobody else in the government can do. And therefore, it falls within a president's core functions, and there is absolute immunity from criminal prosecution. Then there's this second bucket, and that deals with kind of the next concentric circle out, which are official acts. So acts that other high-ranking officials, for instance, can take, not acts that are undertaken by a private citizen. And for those types of actions, the Supreme Court said there is at least the presumption of immunity. And then last bucket, there are private or unofficial acts. And for those acts, the court said no immunity from criminal prosecution.
The idea supporting this ruling is that presidents need the ability to make these like tough, bold, unpopular decisions without the fear of criminal prosecution when they are conducting official acts, right? So can you explain that argument for this ruling further?
That explains it very well. And let's remember that this is based on actually decades old precedent dealing with President Nixon and civil cases. So what the court has said, again, for decades, is that when it comes to a suit for monetary damages, a civil suit, that presidents have absolute immunity based on official acts. In this case, we can really see as an extension of that for basically the same reasons, that we understand that presidents have to make lots of decisions, that we want them to be able to function, and we don't want them to think that around every corner, in this case, there's a state or federal prosecutor who's about to file a criminal complaint because they're trying to undermine the presidency. So what you see here for the majority, I think, is that their main worry is about protecting the presidency and the office of the president. Very different concern when it comes to what the dissent is most worried about.
Okay, so you mentioned on the other side, dissenting justices called this a threat to democracy, saying that now if a president misuses official power for personal gain, there will be no accountability based on the same laws that the rest of us must follow. So can you explain that perspective more? What are the big concerns here?
The dissent is really worried about protecting the criminal justice process, making sure that people can be held accountable, making sure that no person is seen as above the law, even a president, making sure that presidents are not viewed as kings, and really about the public trust in the presidency and about the balance of power in our government. So the lens through which the majority and the dissent see this case is just vastly different. And I think that's why you see two diametrically opposed views here. But again, in my view, it really boils down to what are they most worried about?
What realistically do you think a president could do under the guise of, official acts? Because Justice Sotomayor called out a president could order the Navy SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival and be immune. Do you think it would ever be that extreme?
Well, the majority says no. I mean, Chief Justice John Roberts said that that's fear-mongering, that's hyperbole, and we're not going to get there. I know everybody wants a specific answer to this is exactly what's official and this is what's unofficial. And one of my big takeaways is that it frankly will be difficult in most cases for lower court judges to make that determination, that this line between official and unofficial is going to be somewhat messy. And I do think it is worth repeating that the line does favor immunity from criminal prosecution. So whether or not we ever get to a moment where a president of the United States tries to use the military to order an assassination, the first question would be, is that an official act? And then if it is, there is a presumption of immunity.
Okay, so even if it's extreme, if it's considered official, then there's at least a presumption of immunity. But explain for us further, when it's a gray area between official and non-official acts, what happens?
When there's a question about which bucket we fall within, is this an official act? Is this an unofficial act? That's a question for the trial court. It is a question that can be appealed if the losing party doesn't agree with what the trial court says. But that is a question for the finder of fact. In the first instance, the trial court judge to figure out which one of these allegations can move forward in a case. And that's exactly what Judge Chutkan, the trial court judge in the federal DC election interference case, is going to do with respect to, again, that case pending against former President Trump. She's going to sort through the allegations and figure out which ones the president is entitled to immunity and which ones he's not.
Coming up, we dig a little deeper into what this Supreme Court decision means for the cases against former President Trump. And Jessica Levinson shares her thoughts on whether or not split decisions like this can affect trust and confidence in the high court. That and more still ahead. But first, this episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. There are so many parts of our lives that can be compared to others. Career, house, parenting, the list goes on. And while we all probably know comparison never really helps us, it can be hard to avoid. Whenever I get the urge to compare, because let's be honest, we all do at least sometimes, I can usually catch myself doing it now. Stop and try to reset into a more grateful, gracious mindset. It's thanks to strategies I've learned in therapy. Therapy is a great place to learn how to focus on what you really want instead of what others have, so you can start living your best life. I really think most everyone can benefit from therapy. So if you're interested but not sure where to start, BetterHelp makes it easy. It's entirely online and designed to suit your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Stop comparing and start focusing with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/newsworthy today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/newsworthy. The Newsworthy is also brought to you by SKIMS. If you're like me, then having a great-fitting, high-quality T-shirt is a must-have summer staple. And I found the perfect T-shirts from SKIMS. And look, finding the perfect tee is not easy. Does it fit right? Does it just fall apart the first time you wash it? Well, you don't have to worry because SKIMS makes the best basics. I have 2 SKIMS tees so far, and I'm constantly wearing both of them. The cotton jersey T-shirt in the color marble and the Fits Everybody tee in onyx. Both have this great fitting, soft, stretchy material that makes it so easy to dress up or dress down. So I can wear these tees with joggers for a quick errand or working from home, or throw them on with some jeans and a blazer for a night out. They are so versatile. Plus, I love wearing them because not only do they look great, they feel great. They're super soft and comfortable. Shop the SKIMS T-Shirt Shop at skims.com. Now available in sizes extra, extra small to 4X. And if you haven't yet, be sure to let them know that I sent you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select my show, The Newsworthy, in the drop-down menu that follows. Okay, now back to our conversation. So in terms of that criminal case against former President Trump regarding charges that he interfered in the 2020 election, that the Supreme Court basically said, send that back to a lower court to decide what was official and what was unofficial. So what can we expect in terms of how that plays out?
I think the Supreme Court decision is a win for the former president in two ways. And one is based on timing. There is basically no chance that this federal election interference case is going to go to trial before the election. And the other is substance. Based on the standard that the court lays out here, it's going to, one, take Judge Chutkan a long time to figure out what's official and what's not. But it's also, the Supreme Court has given us a standard that is very protective, not just of former President Trump, but of all former presidents and current presidents. So what happens to that case? Frankly, it really depends on who wins the next election, because if former President Trump becomes president again, then he has said that he will do everything he can to make that and the other cases go away. So that is probably the end of this particular case if he wins the election.
And if he doesn't win?
If former President Trump does not win the election, then we expect that the case would move forward. And then Judge Chutkan is going to sift through this indictment and try and figure out which allegations are based on official conduct, which allegations are not. So for people listening, I think maybe they're trying to figure out, well, what do we keep saying in terms of official versus unofficial? A president is a high-ranking official. And so one of the examples that the court used here are the allegations that former President Trump tried to tell the acting attorney general, open an investigation into voter fraud. And if you don't, I will fire you. That's the type of thing that only the president can do. And therefore, that would fall within the core functions of the president, and he would be entitled to absolute immunity. Then if we're thinking about conversations that former President Trump had with former Vice President Mike Pence, where he essentially tried to say, don't certify the Electoral College results. This was based on the allegations in the complaint. That would fall within, very likely, according to the court, official duties or official conduct. Now, there's then a separate group where we're talking about the former president maybe speaking to private citizens or tweeting to private citizens or calling state election officials. And that's where the court says there's kind of the greatest gray area. And that's where we need a lower court judge to help sift through all of the allegations.
And unlike Trump being able to pardon himself for federal cases, this applies to both state and federal cases against him, potentially.
That's right. So this is a decision based on the federal Constitution. And if a former president has immunity, then that is a protection that would extend not just to federal cases, but also to state cases.
So this was a 6-3 vote from the Supreme Court. What does that tell you? And do you think decisions like this that are split down ideological lines affect the trust Americans have in the high court?
There is a reason that certain presidents appoint certain justices, because they hold their views and they think that they will look at legal questions and come to legal answers in a certain way. Now, I think for trust in the court, what the public really wants is to think that what judges are doing is judging, not making political assessments, but judging. And so the more we have 6-3 decisions where everybody who is appointed by a Republican president votes one way and everybody who is appointed by a Democratic president votes another way, I think the more it shakes the public's trust in the idea that what judges are doing is just different than what politicians are doing.
Final thought or takeaway for our audience?
Final thought is that this is a really good day for President Trump. It's not a good day for special counsel Jack Smith. I don't think that that means that this case entirely goes away, but it will certainly be pared back.
Well, thank you so much to Jessica Levinson for helping to break this all down for us. Be sure to check out her podcast, Passing Judgment, where she explains the biggest political and legal issues of the moment. And tune in tomorrow with our special edition about bridging the political divide in America. And then on Monday, we will be back with our next 10-minute news roundup to get you all caught up after the holiday weekend. But first, we'll be back tomorrow. Until then, have a great day and a wonderful weekend.